one video. Depends. All right, so we're gonna go to Daniel chapter 1. I know now y'all doing a Daniel fast. Let's actually read about Daniel. If y'all haven't done that already, but it's good to just be reminded. All right, so Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Most High gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And Shinar was one of the kingdoms that Nimrod built back in Genesis chapter 11. I think it's chapter 11. Yeah. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed and the princes, children on whom was no blemish, but were well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Chaldeans is another word for Babylonians. And so they wanted the men, they wanted these men and women, they wanted them to be re-educated in the Babylonian teachings so that they could use them as almost like proxy leaders, so they could still be in control of those territories, but use the people as figureheads like they do today, like with the Black Boule. I don't know how we have these black leaders, but it seems like the black community, quote unquote, black community doesn't improve. Yeah, we have these so-called black leaders because they're not really trained to actually improve our situation. They're trained to just be our figureheads. That's always been a tactic that the ruling class has done since the ancient time, like we see right now. All right, verse 5. And the king appointed them of daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah. So they were of the children of Judah. That's Daniel's tribe. That's where Christ came from. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And all their names mean something. We don't have to go into the detail, but Daniel means he will judge. That's what Daniel means. So that's why a lot of Daniel's prophecies talk about end time judgment. You know, all the characters in the Bible, they all have an omen nomen. Like their name represents what they were meant to do on this earth. So that's why a lot of the prophets were named certain things, like Isaiah. His name means Yashayahu, he will save, the Most High will save, or Most High is salvation. That's why he has a lot of prophetic stuff about salvation in the book. Verse 7, unto whom the princes of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and Azariah Abednego. And all those names, they were named after the Babylonian gods, like Belshazzar. Bel was a god in Babylonian. I mean, Bel is, I think it's Bel the Confounder. It's like he's one of the gods that represented like numbers and hermeneutics and counting and stuff like that. I think it's like the Greek equivalent is like Hermes. Yeah, something like that. Verse 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. And therefore he requested of the princes of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself, because Daniel knew about the law. And he's like, we can't eat this food because it's not good for us. It's unclean. So verse 9. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worsen or worse like than the children which are of your sort? then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. So he's afraid that Daniel's going to get malnourished and it's going to make him look bad. Verse 11, then Daniel said to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs has set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech you, these 10 days. Let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. And when you looked at that word pulse, it just means vegetables and seeds, legumes, stuff like that. And then let our countenance be looked upon before thee in the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenance or their appearance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine, and they should drink, and gave them pulse. So they were looking so good. He's like, man, we need to let all the other students get this type of food. In verse 17, and as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill and all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. All right. So we see that is the, that's the technical Daniel fast. Some people like to modify it. Some churches they like to add to scripture, but that's the definition of a clear Daniel fast. It was just, for a week and a half. And, he was in an environment where he couldn't really eat the food, and you saw the differences in his countenance and other people. All right. So we see there's I want to talk about that with the physical benefits of fasting, because there is a physical benefit of fasting. So this is an article that talks about the science, methods, and benefits of fasting. All right. Let's just talk about this. Read this paragraph. A large body of evidence now supports the benefit of fasting. Through the most notable data has been recorded in studies with animals. Even so, these findings are promising for humans. Essentially, fasting cleanses our body of toxins and forces cells into processes that are not usually stimulated when a steady stream of fuel from the body is always present. When we fast, the body does not have its usual access to glucose. Glucose is sugar that the cells use to survive, forcing the cells to resort to other means and material to produce energy. As a result, the body begins gluconeogenesis, a natural process of producing its own sugar. The liver helps by converting non-carbohydrate materials like lactate, amino acids, and fat into glucose energy. Because our bodies conserve energy during fasting, our basal metabolic rate, the amount of energy our bodies burn while resting, becomes more efficient, thereby lowering our heart rate and blood pressure. All right. Ketosis, another process that occurs later in the fast cycle, happens when the body burns stored fat as its primary power source. This is the ideal mode for weight loss and balancing blood sugar levels. So we see there's a scientific benefit of fasting. So, Daniel, he was already looking pretty good based off the other people who were eating that, that meat. And a lot of the meats that they were eating were, cured meats, like, pork and, a lot of, just a lot of meat that, you're not supposed to be eating in Babylon. They were eating a lot of stuff that was unclean. They were eating camels and pork and horses and stuff like that, and random things. All right, let's get back to the scripture. All right, let's go to Matthew 17 down to verse 14. I'll read a little story where even in the New Testament, Christ talks about the benefit of fasting. So, and when they were come to the multitude, this is Christ and his disciples, there came to him a certain man kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed. For oftentimes he falleth into the fire and oft into the water. So oftentimes he just tries to go into the fire and into the water. We would call this like suicidal ideations and attempts, right? Verse 16, and I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Christ answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. And Christ rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Christ apart and said, why could we not cast him out? And Christ said unto them, because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if you have faith as grain, and you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you, unto you. Howbeit, this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. All right. And I emphasize that because if you look into modern Bibles, if y'all have your Bible open, y'all see modern Bibles don't have this verse. This is only in the King James version. And I think one other version, but it's not in the NIV. It's not in the ESV. Um, I think it's not even in the New King James version. But yeah, they took this verse out because there is a power in fasting. Because fasting helps not just physical, but also spiritual. Because just like our cells need glucose and energy, a lot of demons, they feed off things that we ingest physically, believe it or not. So when we fast, we're actually starving out a lot of spirits that are inside us that we obtain throughout a life of bad choices or just things that we inherited inside our childhood homes. So when we go through a process of going into the knowledge, there's a process where we have to fast and we have to pray, we have to isolate ourselves, and the Most High starts to implant his spirit while he's removing spirits off of us, at least for the people that he's really trying to deal with on that personal level. So but it's important that we really try to fast a few times out the year, because that really helps us kind of recharge physically and spiritually. All right, let's go to one. This is a video. It's a bunch of videos online about fasting. Um, People are familiar, probably most common, with Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi talks about fasting, I think like 2 weeks out the year. He doesn't do a lot. He was more like intermittent fasting too, but this is a video talking about the benefits of fasting in regards to cancer rates. And we're going to talk about basically the benefits. And he's like, you want to use the Middle East as an example because they fast for Ramadan, which is about a month, 29 days or so. And they do intermittent fasting. They don't eat anything from sunrise to sunset. All right. So they eat only when the sun is not out. All right. But they have a benefit, or they have a low cancer rate. So let's listen.
Now, if we take the average of how many people get cancer in the entire world, it's 198 people out of every 100,000 people get cancer. Now, if we take a look at individual parts of the Middle East, we have Saudi Arabia. 96 people get cancer out of 100,000. Yemen, 97 people out of 100,000. Oman, 104. Qatar, 107. UAE, it's 107, and Kuwait is 116 people out of 100,000 people get cancer. So you can see, if you live in these countries, you have a much less risk of getting cancer. Let's compare this with Australia. 468 people out of 100,000 get cancer. They take number one, they get first place in getting cancer. Number two, Ireland is 374 people out of 100,000 people. Next one is Hungary, 368 people, okay, out of 100,000. And then United States, 352 people out of 100,000 people develop cancer. So what is so unique about the Middle East? Well, number one, fasting, Ramadan. Now, Ramadan is a religious fast that extends over the course of 1 month. Now, that 1 month is just 1 month of the entire year. What blows my mind is they're fasting right after sunrise to sunset. So they're usually eating before that and eating after that. So Ramadan is considered a type of intermittent fasting, only for 1 month and produces a tremendous decrease in rates of getting cancer. That's quite remarkable. So why does fasting help with preventing cancer? Well, it starves cancer. Do you realize there's between 10 and 50 times more insulin receptors in a cancer cell versus a normal cell? What does that mean? That means that cancer cells have a very avid or greedy hunger for glucose because they have more receptors to eat glucose. Okay, so this is how they diagnose cancer through a PET scan. A PET scan identifies areas in the body that have a very high metabolism of sugar. So cancer loves sugar, and when you're fasting, you're not consuming sugar. All right, number two, autophagy. Fasting stimulates autophagy, which is a condition that helps to recycle old damaged proteins. It helps to recycle old damaged things like damaged mitochondria. And if we look at what cancer really is, it's damage to your mitochondria. When the mitochondria is damaged, the mitochondria then adapts its metabolic system to a different way of dealing with energy. It ferments glucose. When you fast, you kick in this autophagy and you're recycling damaged mitochondria, which is going to decrease your risk for cancer. The third thing about fasting is that when you fast, you generate new immune cells. You strengthen your immune system. Your immune system becomes stronger. You generate more killer T cells, which directly kill cancer cells and viruses. And you also stimulate more helper T cells, which indirectly help reduce cancer. All right, next point about fasting. It's one of the best things to get rid of inflammation. Cancer tends to spread, migrate into areas of inflammation. So fasting is one of the most potent anti-inflammatories. So it's going to reduce the risk of cancer being spread. Also, when you fast, you increase the antioxidant networks of the body. So these things that actually protect you against free radical damage, like in the mitochondria, are improved or enhanced when you fast. So that's going to decrease the risk of getting cancer right off the bat. Fasting is one of the oldest therapies. Even Hippocrates mentioned fasting quite extensively, and he had it.
That's that two serpent thing right there. That's called the caduceus. This is just a side note, but this is the caduceus. This is a symbol that was used in the ancient world. Most commonly, we know it in the Greece. This was Apollo's staff. Apollo was the sun god. He was the son of Zeus, and he was seen as a god of the games. He was the god of sports. He was also one of the gods of medicine. That's actually one of the guys that healthcare professionals they make the Hippocratic oath. That was the original god that they said the oath to. But he had a staff where these two snakes would intersect, called the caduceus, and he gave it to Hermes. And Hermes was the god of language and transportation, that we equivalent to Bell. So that was and that snake was surrounded by the staff. It was a symbol of wisdom. The snake represented great wisdom in the ancient time, and we know the snake from Genesis, from the serpent, because the snake or the serpent in ancient time was seen as someone who was able to give us forbidden knowledge that we didn't understand, and one of them was about medicine. So that's the origin of that staff, and that's why it's symbolic with medicine, because it's able to cause great changes in the body. So that's why they use that snake. And that's also the symbol for the WHO, the World Health Organization. So you kind of can know what they're about spiritually.
An interesting quote, but to eat when sick is to feed the illness. Okay, so when you're ill, you don't want to eat very frequently. And he was considered like the foundational father of medicine. Okay, fasting is number one. Number two would be the spices that people eat in the Middle East. Turmeric, okay, loaded with anti-cancer properties. And
we don't have to watch the whole thing, but I just wanted to say that. And also with the Middle East, they don't eat pork. So pork or cured meats is also a high risk of cancer. So when you mention like Ireland and hungry in the United States, of course, we have a high rate of pork that we eat, so that's what also increases the risk of cancer. So, but there are definitely more studies out there. This is all kind of still new information that people are still debating, but there aren't any randomized trials, randomized control trials to actually uh, give out medical advice for fasting. But as we can see, it does help. And, that was actually one of the things that Dr. Sebi's cure rate with the alkaline diet was intermittent fasting. And also, just having a alkalotic diet or alkaline diet. Um, but and vegetarian. But one of the things about fasting that we gotta talk about, I'm kind of going blank now. Dang, I think that's it. Um, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I got. All right, let's go back to scripture. All right. Anybody have any questions? Say a question. It might make me remember what I said. I forgot. Any questions, comments, concerns?
That was very interesting. I didn't know that fasting could potentially, fight away cancer, like or the potential of getting it. So
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. I now remember. So
I
yeah,
got you.
intermittent fasting, it doesn't always have to be like in Ramadan, they fast during the daytime. We fast at nighttime. That's where we get the word breakfast from. It's called break fast. That's what it means. So it's like you can do an intermittent fasting in your sleep. Like if your last meal is at 5 or 6 o'clock, and then you go to bed and then you wake up at, let's say, 8, and you don't eat breakfast maybe till like 10, if, let's say, from 5 to 10, you fasted for, 17 hours, just from, like, let's say 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. That's 12 hours. You just, wait another 5 hours to eat breakfast. That's 17 hours. So it's like you can do an intermittent fasting in your sleep. We just have to try to not eat as much late at night, things like that. Bless you. Oh, thank you. But
Mommy sneeze, sorry.
oh, I was like, thank you. Appreciate it. So yeah. Intermittent fasting doesn't have to always be so conscious. You could do it in your sleep. And that can help you in the long run. Yeah, for sure. You know. And there are different type of fasts. There's the water fast where you're not eating meat, but you just drinking water. And they have vegetarian fast, like kind of what y'all doing now. And then a dry fast is when you really don't eat anything, no food, no water, for 24 hours. That's a full fast. And we should all do that at least once a year at the minimum. A dry fast, no 24 hours. Of course, if you have healthcare issues, talk to your doctor before doing that, especially if you're diabetic or have kidney issues or something like that, liver issues. But yeah, if you can, try to fast 24 hours, no food, no water. And then if you can, try it, 2 days, 3 days, and see how far you can go, or even do it with water. But it will help your body, helps recover your immune system, helps you feel more energetic, and promotes weight loss. So, you know, those are physical benefits, but also spiritually, if you have issues with, like, let's say, addiction issues, if you have anxiety issues, depression issues, a sense of feeling unsure, doubtful issues, you will have questions about things and you want to really ask the Most High, fasting will help you, your mental state in regards to your relationship with the Most High, and your focus, your attention. So that does help to fast and pray, because it does, like Christ said, things come out of you when you do that. You have the ability to do some miraculous things if you're able to control your mind, which controls your body. So it's all about like a self-discipline type deal. Yeah. So
I did have a comment.
Yes.
I thought it was interesting how Dr. Eric Berg talked about how when you're sick, it's beneficial to fast because you would think it's like not necessarily the opposite, but you know, people always say like make sure you have something in your stomach. But he's saying to fast, and I thought that was interesting. And it made me think about what you said about, you know, having these issues because it's almost like spiritual sickness and fasting helps take it out. Whereas when you have a physical sickness, fasting could also help to take it out. So I thought that's pretty cool.